Well, hello again. Today we're going to put one hub on the video. I'll put the other hub on the rotor, off the video. Now, when you put your hub on, remember the small bearing. There's a small bearing and a large bearing. The small bearing will be out. That's your outer bearing. Your inner bearing will be your big, thick, wide one. Okay, the great big sucker. So when you set your hub back on your rotor, it should be a tight fit, and if it's just loose and flopping around, then you got it on upside down. Now this here, I've just got it, I just took the rubber mallet, tapped it in all the way around. When I do that, I should be able to go ahead and I can almost lift up the rotor, because that rotor is so heavy, man. That thing is really heavy. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to line up the holes for the studs, the lug studs, and we're going to go ahead and tap it in again. This time I'll use two hands to flip it over, and then we're going to take these lug studs and put them in from the bottom up. Now, if you look at the new studs that I bought, let me get a little close up here for you. The new studs compared to the old studs, look where the serrated part is. On the old one, it was right up close to the threads. Yeah. On the new studs, it's back further. But that's not a problem. They'll still work. The reason being is the thick metal, there's thick metal between these two pieces. And this thing will be more, it will wind up right about in the middle of the metal of this part right here. Let me tip it up on edge and I'll show you. See how thick it is right here? We'll go ahead and run a bolt up through, and I'll show you. By the time that bolt gets up in there, it'll be right about in the middle of this thick part right here where my thumb is. See, so you got this part and this part, so no problem. It will work just fine. Once again, we're back where we were. This is the high part of the rotor, and this is the part that's got the looks like little flowers, little flower petals. That goes on top like so. All right. So let's go ahead. Now I did put a little bit of just a very, very light coat of grease on this part right here. Very light with my fingers, just enough to help it go up through the hole and get started. I did not put it on the serrated area, and I did not put it on this area here. Just enough to get this thing started up in there to hold the two hopefully together until I can pull the studs all the way through. First there's now this is the way I do it. There again, this is the way I do it. There's other ways of doing it. You can use a press, you can use boards to hammer it in with, you can use your air impact wrench, which is what we're going to be doing here shortly. Different ways of doing it. Alright, here we go. Let's hope it comes out okay. Again, a light coat of grease just on the bottom part right there, below the serrated area. You could even put a little bit in here if you want. I just don't want it going up where the serrated area is. Now we're going to go ahead and set that down in. We have to make sure all these bolt holes are lined up as closely as we can get them. Another one, another one, another one, and the last one. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold these as straight as I can and just tap them down a little bit, not much. I don't want to be hitting the edge of this thing right here, but I'm going to just kind of put a cloth over there or something so I don't hit that thing and damage it. I'm going to tap them down in a little bit, enough to hopefully hold the two pieces together until I flip them over and finish the job. I'll tell you what, I'll just let you watch me tap one of them in. That's just sitting in there right now. And I'm not going to swing with the hammer. I'm going to tap with my ball peen hammer. That's about it. Hopefully that'll be enough. Let me finish the rest. Now you can see what I was talking about by those serrated edges. See, now this is pretty far in. I got them. They just tapped right on through, but not all the way. But the serrated edge, see how thick it is from here to here? This serrated edge will probably wind up somewhere in the middle once we get it all tapped in. Or even if it's a little bit close to the other ones came right up to the top, right up to this, almost to the surface, but did not protrude through. These will be about in the middle. It's just probably a better design anyway. Alright, what comes next? Well, I went down to the old hardware store the other day, and while I was there I said, you know, I'm probably going to need a couple of large washers to put on there. Not one, but two, because they're not that thick. They're fairly thick, but not thick enough to suit me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grease. I'm going to put a little bit of grease on here. Then I'm going to put it down. Then I'm going to put a little grease on here. Then I'm going to put it down. Then I'm going to put a little grease around the outside. Then we're going to take this nut, put a little, maybe a touch of grease right here. This nut was all boogered up. I had to run it across the grinder and clean off all the, let me get a little clarity here, a little better. I had to knock off all the burrs and everything. Then we'll go ahead and put it on there like that. Then we're going to take our little 15/16 and we're going to go ahead and put this on it. And we're going to just pull it right on down. I don't know why this camera's so, there we go. Okay. We're going to go ahead and pull it right on down, and hopefully that'll pull the bolt, the stud, the rest of the way through. Should be a piece of cake. Alright, here we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and silence the video, because this thing's going to be pretty loud. I just want you to see what we're doing here. Alright, I gave them all their first cinch down, and then once you see, I've got it now just above the top of the lug nut after these two washers are on there. So, you know, how far do you have to really, how far should it be sticking up above? Well, once I cinched them all down the first time, you grab a hold of your hub and you kind of wiggle it to see if there's any noise or any movement. Yes, there is, okay? So that one there is not far enough. I want to get the first one down, so I know how to do all the rest on the second cinch. By the way, when you're doing this, it might be a good idea to tighten these things up in a star pattern. I went here and here. Now I'm up here. Then I'm going to go over here and then here. And that's the way you tighten up your bolts on your wheel anyway, star pattern. And no matter where you start, it doesn't matter. It would be here. If you started here, it would be here, 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 and here. Doesn't matter. Works a lot better that way, I think. Now, is it necessary for this? I don't know, but I'm going to do it. It can't hurt. Well, that's it. She looks really good. I just gave it a wipe down with some Windex to get any residual grease off of there. You know, you get as much off as you can. But that looks really good. It's no longer loose. Let's flip it over and look at the heads on the bolts on the other side. Alright, they're all down tight right against the rotor. All the way around. No space at all, not even a 16th or 32nd of an inch that I could see. Nice and tight. So that, you know, this is a critical operation, actually, what I just did. This is not something that you need to take your time to do it right. If you have loose lug studs on your wheel and you're going 70 miles an hour down the interstate, you know, sayonara, big boy, or anybody else you might take with you. Okay, now I understand. This could have been done with a breaker bar. It could have been done with a great big ratchet, you know, and a socket. There's numerous ways to tighten these bolts down, these lugs down. I don't have that kind of strength anymore, so why not go ahead and use what I have available? So right now we're going to go ahead and put this rear bearing in, and then we're going to put the seal. Now here's an interesting dilemma that I've had since having a conversation with my mentor Brendan. You know, he's not wrong about very many things. Now we have disagreements on sometimes how political issues should be handled. However, when it came to this grease, now you'll remember back when I cleaned these hubs out, there was a lot of grease down in there, and you know, I said, I don't know what that stuff does. It just sits down in there and gums up, fills up with dirt and everything, messes things up completely. Well, Brendan wrote me, he said, John, you don't want to remove all the grease down in there and leave it dry, because now here's what he told me. I had never heard this before, so take it for what it's worth, and also take, I've never seen him wrong about car repair. I've read a lot of magazines and looked at a lot of stuff and worked on a lot of cars. I've never heard this one. He said the grease you put down in there, you put yourself a few gobs down in there right below the bearing. What happens is at high speeds, now pay attention to this. I found this really interesting. He said at high speeds the hub heats up. Well, that's true. And what happens is the grease begins to liquefy. Well, I hadn't thought about that before. And when the grease liquefies, it gets pushed into the bearing, which helps continually cool it as well as keep it, greased up real good. Now, when the car shuts down, and you pull into your driveway or garage and you shut everything off for the day, the grease returns back to its original state, like this. And it's a never-ending cycle back and forth. So he said you got to have that backup grease back there, in there to make sure that happens on both sides of the hub. We're going to put some down there. Well, I'm going to do what he says. Like I said, never heard of that, but it's going to be interesting. I'm going to gum a bum. Now, I guess pretty much what he says is, look, don't go haywire on it. Don't put a bucket load down in there. You just need enough that it'll help cool and oil those bearings at high speeds. Okay, here goes. I'm glad I got a big old can of new grease. This is kind of fun. This is lots of fun. I always like messing with grease, especially when it's new. We'll just go ahead and stick a bunch of that down in there like so. He didn't specifically tell me how much, which is about the size of it. So we'll go ahead and there's now down below the bearing there's a sunk in spot, and almost like a round one of those round tubular seals could fit up in there. You can feel it with your finger. Feel it where my finger's at, and then it juts back out and continues on down. But there is a hollow spot, so maybe if I just fill that hollow spot all the way around, that should do it. I think that's what I'm going to do. I don't have any other choice because I really don't know how to do it. Alright, now we drop our bearing in, our inner bearing, the large one. Drop that baby down in there. And now we're going to go ahead and put our seal in. Let me wipe off some of the grease on the outside edge. I don't like that. Keep it fairly clean on the outside. And we want the grease kept on the inside. And now comes our, I guess I could put a little bit more grease down in there. Let me see. Probably not much, but put a little bit. You don't want to over grease, but you don't want to under grease. Yeah, I like that a little better. Okay. Now we'll go ahead and clean up the edge. And now our seal, our grease seal that goes on the back of the wheel and the back of the hub, that has to be tapped down in there. Now, I can't find the old seal. I kept that seal here so I could use it to tap this one down in with, so I wouldn't have to tap directly on this. So what do we do now? Well, we're not going to let this stop us. Of course not. We'll figure out something. Alright, I think I came up with a quick and easy idea. Again, we're going to use our little block of wood. I'll tell you what, we use wood for everything, don't we? We're going to set that on there like that, but first I'm going to wrap it in this rag. Well, I guess I'm not actually going to wrap it. I could wrap it around like this, but I think it might be a little more efficient if I just tap on the wood with the rag in between. Just lightly tap, take it off and look at it, take it off and look at it, until that seal seats all the way down into that hub. Wish me luck. Well, that idea worked real well. She's nice and flush all the way around, right down in there. Now, when you tap this thing, if you ever have to do it this way, I hope you never do, but it's always best to keep the old seal and tap on it. But if you have to use something like this, anything, make sure there's a cushion in between. Not that they're that expensive. You can replace them with no problem at all, but when you start tapping on it, one side wants to go down, and then when you come over here, the other side wants to go down, this side wants to go down, popping the other side up. So you have to kind of work your way around, be patient with it, and it'll finally, the entire thing will start to go down in, then you just hit it in the center, tap it in the center of the wood, and it'll go right on down, which is what it is right now. That's your grease seal. Alright, right now, this garage is getting hot. It's supposed to have 106 heat index again today. And it is getting hot in here, and I'm going into the house. Well, both rotors and hubs have been now put back together, so we're good to go on that. Now the next thing is to put this, I forget what this thing is called, some kind of a spindle flange thing. Let me find out what this thing is called. It's called a front splash shield to spindle shield. Front splash shield to spindle flange. That's it. Okay, so this is the splash shield. The spindle flange is right here. Okay. Now the torque requirement for these three bolts is 10 to 20 foot-pounds. I'm going back and forth between the passenger side of the car and the driver's side of the car, doing both sides, you know, at the same time before moving to the next step. So when I get done, we'll have both sides complete, with the exception of the brake lines, of course. So I'm going to torque mine to 20 foot-pounds. Well, the bolts and lock washers have been spray painted black, so I'm going to let them dry for a while. In the meantime, here's something I've been meaning to mention to all of our young folks out there who have never used a click type torque wrench. When you're all done, you know, in earlier videos, and there's plenty of other videos on YouTube to show you how to use them, you know, you tighten, you turn the handle until you go up the scale, until you get to the foot-pounds that you want to get, and then you tighten the knob at the bottom. Okay, now when you're all done doing your torque on a click type, you go, this is a click type torque wrench. When you get to the point where it's supposed to be, it goes click click. That lets you know you're there. When you're done, loosen up the lock nut and then unscrew the handle all the way down. In other words, don't leave the spring compressed inside the barrel. Loosen it down so where it's loose again, all the way to the bottom to 0. Okay, and then go ahead, and I would always tighten this up because I'd wind up losing it if I didn't. So anyway, just a little tip there. Let's move on. And of course, in preparation of putting these rotors and hubs back on the spindle, we are, yes, going to have to apply more grease. Same thing we did to the other side. Get it down below the race. Put you a few gobs down in there, around there, per my mentor Brendan, you know, just like that. And like so. Alright, you may remember, now you don't have to go ape on this, okay? Just kind of use good judgment, okay? Now we're going to grease the race. Let's do the same thing to the other one. Get them all greased down in there. Just kind of put a little layer. What I'm doing is forming a little layer with my finger. Kind of pull it up from the bottom. Put a little bit more in there, I think. It looks like I'm putting tons and tons in, but I'm really not. Okay, now we're going to grease the race. Now I'm going to clean up my hands and we're going to put the bearings back in. Now we're not going to put these two bearings in until actually the hub is placed on the spindle. We have to grease the spindle first, and then we place this on. Then we put one of the bearings in and shove it in, and then we go ahead and put our flat washer. This big old flat washer goes on. You notice that little square thing sticking up in the middle. It fits down. There's a slot on the spindle that it fits in. Okay, we're going to put a little grease behind it. Not a ton of grease on this stuff, by the way. I'm not going to paint any of this stuff. This stuff will remain paint free. And then of course this will go over it. The whole thing will sit on the spindle just like this. It'll tighten right in on that spindle. And then we're going to have to put a cotter pin through the spindle, the end of the spindle. So right now I need to find the right size cotter pin. Now when replacing your cotter pins, especially in your wheels, don't get real chintzy on it and put a really thin one in there to hold this thing and, you know, to keep it from unscrewing. You don't want any. This is the one that came out of there originally. Now is that the one that came with the car? Probably not. Probably need one even beefier than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I think what I'll do is I'll take this downtown after I get the nuts on and the washer on. I'll go ahead and place this over the top temporarily, and then I'll take this downtown, see if I can find one that's a little beefier. You want one on here that will, you zero in here. See, this one here is a little bit too loose. This is really not the right size. And now the space between these tabs sticking up corresponds to the diameter of the hole in the spindle. As you can see, they're really loose. That's too loose right there. I don't like that. I'm going to take them down. I'll take this one downtown probably tomorrow. See if I can't pick up 2 or 3 different sizes, even larger than this. Anyway, let's get moving. Alright, now we'll go ahead and grease our spindle down a little bit. We want to make sure we got plenty of grease on there. Around there like so. Be careful of these wheels up here. You want to make sure everything's good. like I keep repeating it, you don't want this thing coming off at 70 miles an hour, burning up or freezing up, the bearing freezing up on you, or you never know what, you know. This is a heavy, heavy car. It's not like newer cars. From here on out, we'll be handling the rotor and the hub with a clean rag. You want to minimize the amount of grease off your hands that might get on the surface of the rotor, where the brake pads are. You know, will be making contact. You don't want that, okay? So let's get it down, get it on there, and then I'll give you a shot of that, and then we'll come back. We'll grab one of these bearings and we'll go ahead and stick it in there, in that hole right there on top of the spindle, or around the spindle. Alright, there she is. Now look, when you slide this rotor, remember you got that grease seal on the back side of the hub that holds the, you know, that keeps the grease in around that large bearing. When you put this thing on, don't be dropping it down on this spindle. You gotta keep it centered as best you can till you get it on in there, and you'll feel it work its way in till it finally goes in at its maximum point. If it's too heavy for you, get somebody to help you, and don't get yourself in an awkward position while you're doing it. Get in a nice, comfortable position. Put that thing in the center as much as you can as you just ease that thing on there, wiggle it back and forth a few times, and it'll just plunk right on in, okay? Now, a lot of you thinking, you know, why does he go through all this detail and everything? Well, I'm going to tell you. One more time, I'm going to cover it. Every day, well, not every day, but at least once a week, I get emails from people that tell me that they really appreciate the detail I'm going into, because they didn't know a lot of this stuff. You know, their dads didn't tell them. They never got an opportunity to learn. What they did learn, it wasn't very much. And now they have an old car, and it may not be a Thunderbird, but a lot of the things I do here apply to other cars as well, like greasing bearings, you know, putting the rotor and hub back on a spindle. It's all the same in the old cars. They just little different designs, that's all. And I'm glad to help them in that way. I don't want anybody getting hurt. I don't want anybody doing something stupid. You have to take your time, and they all tell me they really appreciate what we're doing here, and I'm glad to hear it. Let's get the bearing back in. Alright, we got our bearing in on both sides actually. I did the other side before I came over here. And what we need to do now, if I can get this light, you'll notice that there's a slot right here in the top. You want to keep your hands clean now at this point. You know, don't be getting dirt mixed up into the grease. Dirt will not dissolve, okay? There's a slot right here. See it right there? Let me zoom in. This little key on this flat washer fits in that slot, like so. Alright? Just like that. Then we take our nut. Now there is a torque spec for this. I'm going to go up and check what it is in a little while. We're going to come back and torque this baby. If I can get it to fit on there, that is. There we go. We'll spin it right on down. And then what happens after that, once we get the torque done, then this will go over the top, and the hole that goes through the spindle where the cotter pin goes will fit through those castle looking things, and then it'll come out the other side, and this is a keeper. It'll keep the nut from coming off. So let's go ahead, and I'll have to shove the hub in a little bit more and keep that thing clean too. I'll shove the hub in a little bit more, push the bearing in a little bit more, and continue to screw this nut on. Now we're at a point where I want you all to kind of pay attention, especially you Thunderbird guys. This pretty much applies to any of the old classic cars that have this sort of thing on it that covers the spindle nut that requires a you know, a cotter pin to go through. Let's according to the book here, now this believe it or not, the spindle nut here is only supposed to be torqued 17 to 25 pounds, which is not very much. Now let's say you go ahead and torque it, we'll say 20 or 21. And then when you put this on top of the nut you just torqued, you find out that the hole on this castle thing, they call them cassellations. Anyway, you find that it doesn't line up with the hole in the spindle. You know, the hole may be over here, and right against this thing right here, and you can't get to it. What do you do then? The book says to torque at 17 to 25. Well, here's what you do. Anytime you have that sort of situation, and it even describes it in the manual here, but you know, I've known this for eons. If you wind up where the hole in the spindle where the cotter pin goes through is right here, and this is in front of the hole. And you can't get, what you have to do is back the nut off just enough to where it clears that thing right there, and your hole is exposed, okay? Back it off, don't tighten it up. After you've done your torque, back it off just enough until the hole appears, and then go ahead and put your cotter pin in. Everybody got that? We'll go through it one more time. This is important because you don't want that nut coming off while you're driving down the highway. This thing here goes over the nut. Its purpose, it's a keeper. Its purpose is to keep that nut from coming loose. And let's say after you do your torque, the hole in the spindle that the cotter pin is supposed to go through is being blocked by one of these castellations. What do? You get your tool out and you back off the nut just enough to where the hole is exposed, and you can go ahead and run your cotter pin through. I hope you got that. Nothing to it really. Just got to remember, try not to tighten it, because when you tighten it too much, you're really clamping down on those bearings, okay? Once the torque is set, back it off. Don't tighten it up. I've decided to go ahead and torque mine at 22 foot-pounds. Remember, we got 17 to, what was it, 17 to 24? 17 to 25? Yeah, 25. I'm going to go ahead and torque it to 22 foot-pounds. Hopefully that'll be, when I get all done, hopefully we'll have the cotter pin hole lined up with that keeper. There it is right there, 22 foot-pounds. Doesn't take much. Let me get the keeper on and find out if the cotter pin is going to fit. Alright, let's see how well we did. I'm going to put our keeper on here. Let's find out where the hole is first. It should be horizontal. It is. There's the hole right there. Now, will this thing go on and enable me to put that cotter pin in? First of all, it's going to have to go in far enough. It's not going in there. Why is it not going in there? That's not a good deal. It's supposed to go in all the way until it hits that. Let's see what happens. No. Oh, how about that? We got lucky. We got lucky, ladies and gentlemen. Now I'm going to leave that in there. I'm going to go down by those the bigger cotter pins, but I'm going to leave that in there right now. That doesn't happen all the time. Well, that's it for now, guys. We're going to go ahead and wrap up this video. Next time we're going to clean up the brake pads. These brake pads were good. They had just been replaced at some point in time, and they look great. They're nice and thick. No need to buy new of those. Now, of course, the back of it's kind of scrungy and scroungy. We're going to have to clean that up. I put down the inner right and the outer right in case I needed to use, in case I was going to use the same calipers over again, but that never happened. So we're going to go ahead and put these babies on next time. Brand new ones. You're going to like that. These are the bolts over here to do that little job with. And they carry a pretty big torque, up to 110 pounds. I think it's 75 to 110 pounds. These are hardened steel bolts, okay? So you'll kind of look forward to that. So I appreciate you being with me. Until next time, this is John.